Hello, everyone. We're about a minute away. We'll start in about a minute.
Okay, great.
Hello, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of CISO Platform to today's webinar. CISO Platform is world's first online community. It's solely dedicated for information senior security executives like CISOs, CIOs, CSOs, CTOs, directors, more, with 40,000 plus professionals globally and 5,000 plus members. Today's session is on exposure management for financial institutions.
Hey, Preeta, can we just check? Maybe we'll restart that quick because I think need to go on mute some of the attendees or some of the other areas.
I didn't quite get you, Dave.
Oh, no, it's okay. Just there was some background noise. Maybe if you can repeat.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
I'll just restart again. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. I welcome you on behalf of CISO Platform. CISO Platform is the world's first online community solely dedicated for information senior security executives, CISOs, CIOs, CSOs, CTOs, directors, and more, with 40,000 plus professionals globally and 5,000 plus members. Do join us if you're one of them. Today's session is on exposure management for financial institutions to overcome resource limitations and regulatory reporting. Our speakers today are Dave Lawy, and this session will be moderated by Nasheen Liu, partner and CIO program strategy. Nasheen has been in the technology industry for over 2 decades. As a partner and SVP, CIO program strategy of the IT Media Group, Nasheen oversees the company's initiatives that impact the Canadian IT executive community. If you have any questions for the speaker, please post it in the chat box on your right-hand side. We will address it from time to time or at the end of the session. Over to you, Nasheen, and thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Preeta, for the introduction, and thank you and welcome everyone to the session. As Preeta already mentioned, that today we have a very timely topic about exposure management to overcome resource challenges and regulatory reporting challenges in the financial services industry. And it's my pleasure to introduce our 2 expert panelists, Bikash Barai and Dave Lawy. Bikash is the co-founder and CEO of CISO Platform and FireCompass. He is an IIT Kharagpur alumni with multiple patents under his name. A Fortune magazine 40 under 40, Bikash is well known on the global speaking circuit on cybersecurity matters, appearing at RSA Conference USA, Singapore, Interop USA, TEDx, just to name a few. Dave Lawy is a senior technology executive and co-founder of QunatumSmart. He is a seasoned tech leader with over 20 years of experience in highly regulated environments such as insurance, banking, pharmaceuticals, retail, and payments. He's also a member of the Gartner Research Board and an advisor to Harvard Business Review. So very impressive profiles, and great to have you both share your expert views on the topic. And to the audience members, we want to make today's session interactive, so I would encourage you to submit your questions and comments throughout the session through the chat window. We will do our best to address as many of your questions as possible, but should we run out of time, we will make sure to have Dave and Bikash reach out to you afterwards. Now, gentlemen, let's dive in. In both the US and Canada, the regulators are really stepping up and demanding a higher level of sophistication and cybersecurity maturity from financial institutions. So my first question is to you, if you could, Dave, if you could kick it off for us here. How are the regulatory demands changing? And at a high level, what are the regulators asking for?
Well, that's a great question, Nasheen. What we're seeing is more standardization. So across the board, for US and Canada, they've stepped up their game, similar to many companies where they had to enhance their digital footprint. So does the regulators have to make sure that those digital footprints are standardized. So there's less tolerance for poor hygiene. There are better questions, better maturity matrices that are going out to evaluate the environments and to make sure that they adhere to proper standards. So that's something that's really helped help provide direction for financial institutions across US and Canada. And so it's very clear what they have to follow, what they need to do, and they have steps to do that with clear direction from the regulators, both OSFI and US regulators.
That's a really good high-level overview, Dave. And Bikash, based on what Dave just said, how have the financial institutions responded to these asks? What are some of the ways financial institutions provide for continuous assurance of their cyber posture?
Oh, you're on mute, Bikash.
Bikash, you're on mute.
Yeah. So let me share a slightly different kind of perspective on this. So my background is more from the technology side. I'm not a kind of usual compliance guy. So that's the first kind of disclaimer. And then let me share with you a story. So a parable or whatever. A saint points at the moon, and what most people see is the finger. Some goes and worships the finger. Some goes and debates no finger is not the answer. So I think we need to look at these various guidelines or various things coming from the regulators as more as the finger and not the moon. And that's very, very important. So if we think of the moon, what is the moon? It is quite obvious, right? We're talking about real cybersecurity. That's what we all want. But let's kind of deconstruct the moon a little bit more. We all know about the standard things which are required, etc. So I'll talk about it in a slightly strategic directional sense right now, and then we'll delve a little bit deeper a little bit later during our conversation. So if you look at what are the major changes which are happening in the industry, and I had been kind of observing the industry for the last couple of decades, and a lot of interesting changes has happened in the industry. And I generally kind of look for what are those kind of future directional changes. So if I think from that perspective, there are two major kind of fundamental shifts which are happening in the cybersecurity industry, which is going to be very important for us to kind of take us towards the moon. Now, one interesting change is that as a industry, we realize that we will not be able to protect ourselves, whatever we do. And that is the reason why came up this drive for detection, response, and remediation, right? And NIST came up with that. And then the entire set of technologies also moved into that direction. So that is, if you look at the XDR movement, it's part of that fundamental movement which is happening in the industry, which is this realization we cannot protect ourselves always. There'll be moments when we will our security will not be enough. So we need to detect, respond, and recover. And this XDR movement is one. There's a second interesting movement which is happening in the cybersecurity industry, which is the bad actors in the field of cybersecurity. They used to be more targeted, like 5 years, 10 years back. They used to go after the large organizations, go very targeted. We had those days of APT and targeted attacks, right? But today, if you look at, there's some fundamental shifts. One is it doesn't matter whether you're big or small. Ransomware guy can attack you. And the second change is that these attacks are continuous. Unlike 5 years back, today the attackers have gone continuous, and the moment a new CV is out, they're building scripts and scanning the entire internet. Today there is Shodan through which you can go and find out which are those vulnerable assets, and then there are these bug bounty programs which feeds this information to the bounty hunters. So this information of your exposed assets are being continuously sent to them. So attacks are continuous. That's the second thing. Now, because attacks are continuous, our defense also has to be continuous. So there is also a movement which is happening in the industry, which is the continuous movement. One is the XDR movement, and the other is the continuous, moving to continuous movement. And that is happening in many different shapes and forms. Like if you look at the zero trust, and zero trust I consider is a very bad name because most people misunderstand what zero trust is. They consider it's like zero trust, you don't trust. I mean, that's not the idea. The idea about zero trust is continuous evaluation of trust. So that means that you give the password and I'm trusting you right now, but if you behave differently, I'm going to remove my trust, like your trust is going to change. So trust is now evaluated continuously. So zero trust, a better name could have been continuous trust rather than zero trust. So look at zero trust. Even though zero trust looks like something, but underlying theme is again continuous. Look at any other places like continuous. I'm from the field of attack surface management and red teaming. Even that part is getting continuous, like continuous red teaming, continuous pen testing. So everything is becoming continuous. So these are two major drives in the industry which are happening. One is moving to the XDR. Protection is not enough, detect, respond, and recover. And the other is things moving to continuous. So I think these are two most important things which we as the professionals need to look at. We all need to look at these compliances as the finger of the saint. That's not the moon. we need to look at the moon. And if you have to go towards the moon, unlike the moon, I mean, this is something which you can never reach. You continuously try to reach. You have to look at these two core underlying movements which are happening in the industry.
Thank you, Bikash. I really love your analogy, and then the two trends that you've outlined are really bang on. And at this point, I also wanted to remind our audience, please do chime in and comment in the chat window. What are some of the trends that you have observed? But more importantly, what are some of the tactics you're implementing to provide continuous assurance of your cyber posture? And Dave, speaking of risk mitigation, cyber insurance is another strategy many FIs leverage with mitigating risk. Is cyber insurance really that important given what Bikash just talked about? And how does it best serve a organization?
Well, I'll play on Bikash's analogy. Sometimes you need many fingers to point at the moon. And so in this case, this would be one of the other mitigating controls. So definitely you need to have the actual cybersecurity continuous improvement and all the other pieces in play from a security perspective to actually have those measures. But cyber insurance is another mitigating control. The thing to keep in mind with cyber insurance today, and a lot of companies don't have it, they're not aware of it. It's getting better in terms of there are some very simple scans that they perform. Before, it used to be a little spreadsheet they'd send out and you fill it out and you get it back. And if you have an actual claim, you may have some challenges going through that process. So that's gotten a little bit better in terms of putting the claim in. Putting that aside, cyber insurance is a mitigating control. The exclusions and endorsements have become either increased from an exclusion perspective. Endorsements have become more complex. Year over year, the price of cyber insurance is going up, and it's going up for a reason. So back to your question around risk mitigation, it's one of the tools, one of the fingers pointing at the moon. However, at the same time, the insurers are seeing it's higher risk. That's why the price is going up as well from cyber insurance. So definitely something to have to protect yourself. You need to have the right, putting cyber insurance in place, get you the right teams, right measures in place when you do have those, if that does happen. And it's in many cases, you look at the insurers and based on the trends and the information they're providing. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how severe. So this is one of those mitigating controls that will help an organization. So absolutely a must. And I would see in some regions that this would become mandatory depending on your business. It's already become mandatory in some areas. So yes, definitely a tool that needs to be put in place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And how can financial institutions best demonstrate they're actually adhering to security standards and compliance frameworks? How are these standards maintained and updated? And I know, Bikash, you said you're not a standards guy per se, but would you like to kick off the answer and then we'll have Dave expand on that?
Sure. So I love technology and solving the core problem. But of course, like standards is something which we need to continuously work with and also work on, and also been part of developing some of those frameworks, etc. So if you look at the regulators, now there had been a time when the regulators used to come and ask you like, show this, they used to look at the policy, and they used to look at some artifacts and leave. Now regulators are increasingly looking for like, is this a program or is it like you are just cooking up the data to show us? Like very early days of PCI and BS 7799, etc. If you all remember, just before the audit, people used to go and get all these printouts and create all these artifacts and show like, yes, we have something. I'm talking about very early days, right? But now the regulators are much more mature and they just don't stop there. They would like to see the program. Do you have, it's not like you went to gym once. Do you have a program that you're going to gym every day? That's what they want to see, because they are really kind of looking at the health of the cybersecurity organization. And from that perspective, there are a lot of things which are essential. So one thing which I would suggest is like, of course, build the program, but then see how that program can be made very repeatable, and also how can you continuously improve upon that. That is another thing which regulators are looking for. So you can build a process and scale that manually, but generally in cybersecurity, the speed at which everything is moving, the bad guys, good guys, everybody, you can't really stop at just building a process. You got to automate. So that is something which is super important. So when you automate these programs to the extent possible, in some cases you can't, then evidence is a lot easier, and also the confidence level that you get from the regulators when they come for the audit is much higher. And thirdly, very important, you can also continuously work on that and make it better. So I would like focus very heavily on building a program rather than trying to meet the regulators' requirement. And if you have to build a program, you got to build a solid process which is repeatable, and definitely automation is going to be the core of that.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. The theme I'm hearing today, the keyword is continuity, being continuous, because the attack is continuous, and the regulators are asking for strategies that are also on an ongoing basis. And from a protection perspective, the financial institutions must come up with strategies and programs to sustain that continuous protection. So Dave, your perspective on that?
Yeah, similar. I've been through hundreds of audits and lots of fun with auditors coming, policies, procedures, training records, show us the evidence. However, to Bikash's point, as the complexity increases, as the environments have higher demand, regulators have higher demand, 100% agree. It's a matter of how you design, build, and deploy your systems. And it can't be a one-time activity. It's too much effort. It's too much to manage, maintain, sustain that in a way that's very manual. So it has to be programmatic. And that's where, from the build process, the design process, build process, sustaining process, today we have DevSecOps, we have other buzz terms that are out there, but ultimately security has to be built into your design. Security has to be running all the time and not put on afterwards. We often hear this, it's put in after the fact. It has to be part of the process, baked into the process to be part of your sustaining systems. And that complexity to manage, be it hundreds of processes, services, other things that even a small business today has, where before they did not, you need to really programmatically maintain that state. So there are tools out there, there are things out there, many different options to manage the state. And then when you have the auditors come into you, or even change management within your own organization of how you maintain, sustain your systems from an auditing perspective, there's full audit trail. It manages everything. It sustains your state. It embeds the security. Those pieces all need to be there to be set up for success. Otherwise, it's just the burden on the staff on those adhering to those processes is quite high. It becomes very expensive from a time and people perspective.
Yeah, very well said. And just a reminder for the audience, please do chime in with your comments and questions. CISO platform is for the executive peers to share best practices and challenges with one another so that everyone can benefit. Do take advantage of the opportunity. We addressed some of the regulatory challenges here and what FIs should be mindful of to better ready themselves. But the industry, however, is not just dealing with the increasingly complex regulatory demands, but also a scarcity of cyber talent. Dave, your observation about cyber talent trends and how companies are coping with ever-evolving threat landscape.
That's a great topic, and I think a lot of it's something discussed often. Just overall war on talent and shortage of staff in IT, and then you look at security, it's even worse in terms of the shortage of staff. So it's a real challenge to look. You know, we've talked about in this discussion how much companies now need to adhere to higher standards. There's more complexity in the environment, and then you layer on top of it the war on talent and the cyber talent trend, where there are a shortage. There's been a shortage because cyber over the years has been, you know, that funnel has not been as strong. There hasn't been as many people. If you go back 10, 20 years ago, most of the folks were infrastructure, half infrastructure, half security. A lot of people, it's a challenge to find talent. So the people coming out of the universities, there are less of them, and the demand is higher than anything else we have across the technology landscape. So something that really needs to be looked at as we try and defend and we have more sophisticated attacks, we need security people that are you know, they have the experience, they've tested their skills and knowledge, and you know, there's more availability. But to that point, that goes back to the overall theme around trying to see how you can leverage the systems with the talent. But it is a problem.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. And to the audience, what are your observations on this talent topic? And do the resource challenges resonate with you? And how are you addressing it? And do share and use the chat window to voice your opinion as well. And let's move on to the next question, which is very exciting. So, given all the challenges that we've discussed, what are some of the more effective strategies for managing exposure in the face of talent shortage and increasingly complex regulatory demands? Bikash, your view on this?
Sure. So there are a couple of things which I would like to maintain or I'd like to talk about today, but there are many other things which needs to be done. But these are like two things which are more kind of closer to my heart. So let me start with those. So let me share a kind of personal story on, like, since you mentioned exposure management, right? So I had a like previous venture on automated application security testing. That company got acquired. Eventually, it landed up in the hands of Synopsys. So once my kind of the minimum period which I had to stay was getting over, I was thinking like, what's the next idea which we could work on? So one very interesting and strange thing which I noticed was one of the largest financial institutions, financial services company globally, very, very respected company. They got compromised because they had an open database without any password. Now, any tool, any vulnerability assessment tool would have caught that. And they have such a sophisticated team that they would just catch it very, very easily. So I was very intrigued, like, why did they miss that? And once we went deeper, what we saw was something very interesting. Like their marketing team created this database along with a subcontractor. It was not part of the asset register. So cybersecurity was not even testing it, not even monitoring it, and that had customer data, which caused a very huge exposure of customer data of the organization. Now, then when we kind of looked into the trend, we saw like this is gradually becoming the kind of fundamental truth. Like organizations are becoming decentralized. There's no central power, which we earlier used to have, like anything going up online had to go through the IT department. So because of cloud and now like remote working and rapid movement to digital, etc., and also lack of central kind of control, this problem is just becoming worse and worse. So we saw that this, like our digital attack surface or our internet exposure, external attack surface, whatever you might call, this needs to be monitored continuously. We as an industry must have the ability to know what changes are happening on a continuous basis. That's very important. Continuous, near continuous, whatever it is, like very, very frequently. That's something which is super important. Another very interesting story, this is from my kind of school days. During the school days, I remember like every time Patch Tuesday was out there, some new patches came up. There was a group of hackers who used to immediately go and reverse engineer that, find out which are the vulnerabilities which has been patched, then go and try to write an exploit for that. And the goal was going and how quickly can somebody own the university network. So those days it was more like people were doing things at the university centric manner. But fast forward, if you look at today, I mean, the same thing is happening, but that is being done by the bad actors, and they're doing it on the entire internet. The moment something new comes up, they're trying to kind of exploit the entire internet. So here's the second kind of realization. The first was like, we don't know our attack surface, we don't know our assets, we got to solve that. The second is the bad guys are continuously attacking all of the assets all of the time, whereas we as the industry, we are testing only some of the assets some of the time. That doesn't work. We also as an industry must have the capability to continuously discover our assets and to continuously test it and fix it before the bad actors can exploit. So with that vision, if you look at, we need to do a couple of things. We need this, of course, exposure management, external attack surface management, which goes and does the discovery. But just doing the discovery has its problem, which is a lot of false positives, which creates alert fatigue. And now in the cybersecurity industry, if you talk about two biggest pain points with anybody, they will talk about two things: too many alerts and too few people. And too many tools, maybe three things. Too many tools, too many alerts, too few people. They don't have enough people. So that's definitely one. But they don't want more alerts. And there's sort of false positive with this kind of method. So it's very important that once you discover, you are also able to test it and then try to exploit it and figure out what's real, what's not, so that then you have a very prioritized list. You should be able to prioritize that based on my adversary. These are the most important thing. And that is the reason why red teaming also got automated, and that's also getting continuous. So we named continuous automated red teaming, or CART. So Gartner call it as just automated red teaming. So we have a few different versions of names floating around in the market. But whatever you might call, it doesn't matter. Red teaming also needs to be automated, and that is happening today in the industry. So continuous attack surface management, continuous red teaming, these are two things which becomes very, very important. So Nasheen, I kind of broadened it a little bit from exposure management because that has got some challenges. We got to solve that, else like it is difficult to digest, difficult to kind of get the nourishment from. So doing the red teaming on top of it, that solves the problem of removal of false positives, that solves the problem of prioritization, that solves the problem of knowing further kind of attack paths which exposure management cannot.
Yeah, thank you, Bikash. Thanks for the insight and very well said. So Preetha, I saw you in the chat window suggesting someone may have a question, whether to this discussion point or the previous talent discussion point. Do we have anyone with a question? No? Okay. So let's, if you have any questions, please do chime in. What are you doing to manage exposure? What's working well and what needs to be improved? So do share them with your peers. Preetha, do you have anyone? No? Okay.
And again, I can see David has raised his hand. I have
Okay.
unmuted him. David, if you can hear me, questions, I can see your hand raised. So you'll just have to unmute yourself to start talking. If there's anybody else who has a question, just raise your hand. There's a hand symbol there. You can raise your hand and we'll put you on stage.
All right. So
Another
while
option could be just type it in chat, if anybody
Yes.
wants to just type it in chat.
okay, so while we're waiting for our audience members to chime in, Dave, just to further expand on that question, your thoughts about leveraging SaaS security solutions and automation to augment a security team. Are there areas you see that might be helpful that we haven't covered?
Similar to what Bikash was saying, that ultimately, companies don't want headaches. They want to reduce their headaches. How can that happen? So there are many ways, many challenges that happen. There is alert fatigue. There is a challenge to present evidence and other things in a repeatable, predictable way. What's happened, and because of the increased risk that organizations have, you start seeing chief risk officers, privacy officers, third-party risk management programs expand. And you start seeing the demand to provide repeatable, predictable output, similar to what we were saying. It's a program, it has to be built in. So when you start looking at some of the SaaS solutions or automation or continuous improvement, continuous scanning security solutions, similar to what Bikash is mentioning, the tools that he has in place, that reduces the burden on the IT organizations. It allows them to provide that information to the third-party risk management programs. And what I've been seeing across the industry, customers, vendors are going through a lot more scrutiny. So the customers have to show to the customers have to show that the vendors have to show to their customers the different measures that they put in place. You can't just do business with other companies nowadays without providing some of that evidence that you have the right security posture in place. So anything that can automate that, anything that can show that, hey, we have continuous security scanning on our environment. Here's our exposure. Here's our external threat attack or our attack surface, and that we've scanned it and we've put the appropriate measures in place. So so one of the big drivers that we're seeing, in addition to regulators, is that customer vendor relationship, that vendor management relationship. So onboarding, offboarding customers, working with other vendors, that is, you need to provide some kind of security. Before it was a MSA, you sign, you do business with someone. Now it's show me that you have a good security posture or we can connect to your environment. And providing that evidence to all your vendors or your customers, depending on the relationship, is a challenge. So I would definitely leverage a SaaS solution to provide me with that evidence that we've continuously have that program in place, and we can go through that third-party risk management. And a lot of companies, I would say, are also not equipped internally with their security departments to provide that. They have a team that helps and does those things, but it just, that burden of additional evidence, additional information, filling out those third-party risk registers on a continuous basis, anything that can be done to help to mitigate the burden that's on IT. Like, there is a lot of work to be done to transform organizations, to help organizations move them forward, to do business with different companies. Anything that can be remove some of those roadblocks, being, you know, third-party risk, those surveys that are sent back and forth, is essential, because that's only going to increase.
Yeah, great point. I think, you know, from both what Bikash and Dave said, to have the ability to continuously stress testing your organization's readiness and preparedness for cyber attack, and to increase your cyber posture and cybersecurity strategy maturity is so important. And to Dave's point about keeping that audit trail, third-party audit trail, and to meet the regulatory reporting requirements. And I think those 2 points are super important. And we actually have a few questions from the audience members. So I like to take a pause here and to address some of them. So the first one is, we are struggling with tagging our applications in a consistent, standardized manner as we move from on-prem to the cloud. Any suggestions on how to improve that with automation and standardization? Which one of you would like to take that on?
I don't, either way, Bikash, I don't mind.
Okay, so I can go for the first take, Dave. After that, please go ahead. So tagging our applications in a consistent, standardized manner. So one thing which I would like to understand, like what do you mean as tagging? So is the tagging more from the perspective of like tagging it based on the organization it belongs to, or the business unit, the criticality of that, the ownership? So you can do tagging based on multiple perspectives. So let me just consider that you want to tag it from all the perspectives and try to answer. So this is a very, very challenging problem from the perspective of like knowing all the assets and then classifying those. If you mean tagging as the classification tags, then probably what I'm going to answer will make sense. If not, I would like to understand your question better. So the one is like the discovery part becomes very, very critical, because if we don't have the discovery, we can't do the rest of it. So asset discovery, you can do it based on two perspectives. One is from outside in perspective, which tools like EASM can do. So start with your asset inventory. That's the first step. Then do the EASM kind of external asset inventory discovery. That may help you to find out some assets which are not part of your asset inventory. And we have seen that coming up like time and again with lots and lots of customers of ours. Marketing created an application 5 years back, campaign is no longer on, but the application is still on the internet. Nobody maintains it, got customer data, and we could compromise. So knowing those kind of assets is very important, that you do an external discovery using EASM kind of solution. But you can also do internal discovery. There are tools like which Gartner called it Chasm sometime back. I don't know what they call now, which looks at your internal network and figures out and discovers application. So also looking at the internal discovery would be the other. So having a combination of these three things, start with your asset inventory, whether it's Excel sheet, CMDB, whatever, do an external EASM kind of discovery, and then a Chasm kind of internal discovery, and then keep on maintaining and managing this. So that would be the kind of high level approach which is in my mind. Dave?
Yeah, I definitely need to understand more of the question, but if I was to try and interpret in a path forward the structured data versus unstructured data and how you would look at that, Obviously, with the like G Suites and the Microsoft, they have labeling and different pieces. So you need to have your labeling standard, be it 3-4 labels that you put together for data categorization. When you start looking at the corporate assets and the office documents, that's quite easy. Anything you save or open, you put in a policy, DLP, that's much more straightforward. But from a categorization tagging perspective, unstructured, structured data for commercial systems servicing your business, the best way I would approach it is that the pieces that you need to classify that are the most critical, address those first, understand your digital crown jewels, understand which data is critical, put that into the appropriate areas, be it the encryption or the buckets that would then tag them or associate them. And the applications would inherently have those properties associated with them, which would then tag it as confidential and have the appropriate measures applied to them. Then you can work your way down from there would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Dave. I hope that addresses your question. And we have another comment from the audience. I think it's to the previous talent topic. And the comment says, we're hiring with the full intention of a 6-month training period where we get individuals who are eager to learn. We also aggressively try and retain those who have been with the company for at least a few years. Good on you. Congratulations. Yeah. And there's another comment from the audience that said, definitely too many tools, trying to learn a few new every month. What do you say to that, Bikash?
That's the life of a cybersecurity professional.
Yeah,
You
and
can't
I
do
think,
much about it. You got to live with it.
yeah, I think unfortunately there's no silver bullet. There's no one magic tool that would fix all our problems, especially in today's world where we just discussed everything has become increasingly complex and sophisticated, and our cyber posture needs to respond accordingly. So we really need to take a multi-pronged, multifaceted approach to address these problems. As much as we hate layering on another tool, I think if you take it from a strategic a strategy point of view, oftentimes it does make sense to think more holistically.
Yeah, I would agree, Nasheen, and I feel there's good people talk about good cyber hygiene. It's the same thing with the tooling as well. So it's a constant battle, vendor sprawl, tooling sprawl. You have to try the new latest greatest tools because they offer so much advantage, but at the same time you need to shut down and decommission, so it becomes vendor hygiene similar to cyber hygiene.
Absolutely. And we have another question from Jeff. Cybersecurity budgets are under pressure. How can I mitigate the rising costs of talent, budget constraints, and the need to implement continuous exposure management?
So let me take this one. So it's definitely a hard thing. Now, the challenge is like when you look at exposure management, automated red teaming, these tools are new in the block. So it's not going to be very easy to hire somebody. They would come in, they would get trained, and it's going to take time, money. Now, one solution for this is going for managed service. So somebody who has the tools and also can offer a layer of service on top of it. And if you're a mid-sized organization, and that's a great solution, because you may not need a full-time person for running that. And also managed services folks, they know the tools, and they also are trained on that. They have probably a better license price. Maybe they can pass on some benefit to you. So that could be a good kind of solution. In fact, interestingly, when we launched this as a product, we got some feedback from various folks, like especially from the mid-market, that can you offer this as a managed service? So we also have a small managed services team who does this as a managed service for some mid-market organizations, but we also got partners trained on this. So there are partners who can also offer. So I believe that not just for exposure management, for many of the cybersecurity solutions, this could be a solution where you go to managed service.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you, Bikash. Our next question is from Ernest. How are you managing the internal and external vendor risks as part of the overall IT risk management strategy? Would you like to take that, Dave?
Sure, that's also a pretty big question there. So obviously there is, if I was to simplify it, it's all about the onboarding, offboarding of your vendors. So I would start with that. It's a very, I can talk about the IT risk management strategy all day, but I would start with having consistent onboarding, offboarding processes in place with your external vendors. That would be the big piece, and obviously that life cycle of continuous monitoring, managing that periodic review. So to have a good policy, a good process in place, and have consistency across all your vendors. So you treat them all the same, you monitor all of them, and you also have a good onboarding, offboarding.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Bikash, anything to add?
I think Dave mentioned like some very critical element. Few things, like it's a big thing. Like it's not a vendor risk management becomes a big part of the program. Few things which you might consider would be like knowing your vendors. Like that's also again another very hard problem. A lot of times people don't know the list of all the vendors, and somebody goes and starts working with another vendor without the knowledge of the security team. So just the policy is not enough. Also doing some discovery. Like we have seen sometimes exposure management or external attack surface discovery is able to go and figure things out. Like here is a database which exposes your data on this specific IP. We found that for one of the banks, and they came back and said, you know what, that's not any IP address of our bank, but the data looks like ours. Then it turned out, we figured out that belongs to a specific organization, which was a AI company doing certain things related to receivables, and this server had like a lot of data related to the signature of their corporate customers. So then it turned out like this particular AI kind of organization, early stage company, they were working with this bank, but when the bank went and looked into their inventory of all the, or rather list of all the vendors, the name of the vendor was not part of it. Then they went deeper and tried to figure out why is the vendor name missing, and it turned out like one of the business unit did a proof of concept with these guys, and they gave certain data to them which was exposed. Now knowing certain exposures like this is a very hard problem. So you got to kind of know your vendors from the process and all those things, classify those vendors, but also have a process of going and scouting the internet, figuring things out. Is there something else? Is there something more which is out there on the internet? So some of those edge cases is also something which organizations typically don't think about, but could also be part of your vendor risk.
Yeah, good point. And sometimes when we're trying to tackle a huge topic, you know, I guess the more practical strategy is just pick one or two things that are tangible and start doing them. So to our audience members, if you have any strategies to manage both internal and external third-party risks, do share with us and with your peers through the chat window as well. As we're approaching almost the end of the discussion, Dave and Bikash, can you provide some takeaways for the audience to help them best manage risk? Bikash, I'll start with you.
Okay, sure. So when it comes to risk management, there are multiple different schools and multiple different religions, whatever you might call, to measure and manage risk. And there are pros and cons of both. or all these approaches. So one of the approaches which is out there, which is more like measure the risk and then quantify that risk and then assign a dollar value to that risk. I think that's a great thing. If you really have a mature process, a very good, strong model, that's very, very helpful. But most of the times what happens is that people end up building like very strong, building a house with very strong beams and structures, but it is on sand. And if you are on sand and if you don't go enough depth and figure out a really solid structure, whatever you build on top of it, it really doesn't matter. That might look very strong, the walls and doors and windows, but if the fundamentals are not strong, it's going to just collapse. And that is something which happens a lot with this kind of risk management models. The fundamental assumptions and the fundamental models are not strong enough. So unless you really have a very mature process, I would say like doing some kind of risk quantification like that is very hard. So mature, not just process, very mature organization where you have really tested out those models. And there are a lot of organizations who does it decently well, like any underwriter for insurance, they have to build a very strong model, otherwise their company is at stake, right? Like they have built certain things, but even they know that their assumptions has to be tested over a period of time. When you do insurance for people's life insurance, they have data for like 50, 60 years or even more. For this, it's new. So, but they know the risk, they've spent adequate time. So if you do not have very high maturity, going that route is not very helpful. So that's one thing which I wanted to mention. Then what is the other way to solve this? I think a better way or an easier way in certain ways, which could also be more practical and more useful, is to look at it from the perspective of adversary. Go and look at Verizon DBIR and see what kind of attacks the bad guys are doing, which are causing breaches. Look at from that perspective. Look at the various threat intelligence data and use that information. Like my adversary or our adversary are XYZ, and they use these kind of techniques and they use this kind of attacks. So let me prioritize based on that. So definitely you can prioritize your assets. That's much easier. If you know the assets, you can prioritize. You know which has got high value data, which has got less high value. But if you have to prioritize the vulnerabilities and risks, look at it more from the adversary perspective. Where I think it's much easier to kind of comprehend, understand, rather than some of these mathematical kind of computation models which gives you a dollar value, unless you really are very mature organization. That's probably one thing which I would like to say. Dave?
Thank you, Bikash. Great takeaways. And Dave, what about you?
Well, first, I love all Bikash's analogies. He has the best analogies. But what I would say when I look at that, if I was to simplify, the first thing is just understanding overall your environment, your holistic landscape, understanding what that landscape is. We've talked a lot about discovery and other things, but just really understanding what your technology landscape is, and then making sure within your department, within your company, within anyone you work with, that holistic landscape, let's say that map of the country you live in, that drawing of what that looks like, is shared with everyone. Because often you'll have everyone will say, I live in Canada, so Canada looks like this. It's these provinces, this color, we draw it out and it's pink. That's the color of Canada. But then the person beside me will say, yes, I know the landscape, I know what it looks like, I know what Canada looks like. And then I'll see his drawing or her drawing, and it will be completely different. So it's a matter of understanding your holistic technology landscape, making sure that you're looking at the same landscape as everyone else beside you, understanding the assets that are in play. And then from there, you can start looking at what is the level of maturity you need to make sure those assets are secured, that landscape is managed, and then trying to adhere to that appropriately based on the risk that you have facing you. So that risk management, your question, managing risk, it all depends on the industry. What's right for one might not be for the other. So you need to right size that as well for your organization to protect your assets appropriately and make sure that you can see what that environment is and put the appropriate measures in place.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I think, from what I'm hearing, the key word here is to understand, because knowledge is power. The old days of having your IT department being the single point of control are gone. Now, with shadow IT, hybrid working, rapid digitization, there's really so many potential attack surfaces and vulnerabilities that are unknown to us. Wouldn't it be nice to get to know the unknowns, have a clear handle on your security operations preparedness, and in the same time meet the ever complex regulatory reporting demands? That is a key piece of takeaway for me. Before we wrap, is there a call to action for the audience to help them explore the next steps? Dave, what about you? Any call to action to offer?
Definitely, we're at QunatumSmart, we're highlighting how we can help companies with their digital journey. So reach out to us. We're here to help. We can help interpret the different scanning, the different things that are hitting your environment, help you with your digital journey, help you with that discovery, and help you with that path forward. So reach out to us at QunatumSmart, and we can help you with a complimentary discovery session and help you down that digital path, that's that security path that will help you mitigate your risks.
Thank you, Dave. And Bikash.
Yeah, and Nasheen, yeah, before I get to that, you asked me this question on risk management, and then I was just thinking, like, I actually did not give the answer to your question. It's very hard. I mean, nobody can give the answer in very short. I mentioned what not to do. So I thought, let me share something on what to do and not just what not to do. So interestingly, risk management is very much like the happiness problem. One is we really don't know what happiness is. I mean, we as mankind, humankind, haven't really figured it out. We think this is going to make us happy. After we get that, we don't feel happy, and it's a difficult problem to solve, right? So risk management is something very similar. But one very interesting thing, like which is very similar to the happiness problem, is that you have some generally happy folks, and the happy folks, whatever bad thing happens, they come back to the happy state. And then you have generally unhappy folks, whatever good thing happens in their life, they generally come back to that negative state, right? So when it comes to risk management, I think it's very important that we build a program where we come back to the safe state as a business. So bad things can happen, risks are there, but can we come back to the safe state as a business? So the organizations which can kind of and this CSF is very close to that philosophy in a way, right? Like you try to detect and then you respond and recover. So I think very important part of like risk management as a program would be like how quickly you can come back to the safe state as a business. How can you be resilient? So the response and recovery part becomes very, very critical when it comes to risk management. So that's the other part. I know I stayed at a very philosophical level, but it's very hard to go tactical. It would probably need days or weeks to build a program for risk management. Now back to Nasheen, the other thing which you mentioned, like one thing we would be very happy to, for anybody in the audience, if you would like, we would be happy to offer you a kind of free discovery of your attack surface, and how does the hacker's view of your attack surface look like, what kind of exposure you have. We would be happy to conduct an assessment and provide you with the results. So you will have a kind of good view of how does the attack surface look like, are there some unknown unknowns, any surprises.
Thank you,
So it seems
Bikash.
Smita sent a chat with the link. That's nice.
Yes.
Yeah, similar with QunatumSmart, I think I put it in the chat. Just email hello@quantumsmart.com and we'd be happy to help you, be it interpret that report from FireCompass or help you with any other means in terms of your digital journey and security journey.
Thank you, Dave. And before we close, do we have any more questions that we need to address from the audience? If you do, please do put them in the chat window, even though we're running out of time, but the teams here will make sure to get back to you after the session. I want to thank both Bikash and Dave for their insights today. Thanks to everyone who listened in for your time investment and engagement. I hope you find the session useful. I also wanted to thank CISO platform, FireCompass, and QunatumSmart for having me. Lastly, do take advantage of the complimentary scan from FireCompass and the consulting offering from QunatumSmart to help you build a path forward for a more secure digital journey. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you, Nasheen. Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Nasheen.
Bikash,
Thank you, Dave.
for such an insightful
Thanks
session
everybody.
today.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you to the
Thanks,
audience.
everyone.
If you have any further questions that we were unable to address during the session, please post it to my email ID. I have sent that to you on the chat box. It's pritha, P-R-I-T-H-A .aash@CISO.com. Is there in the chat box? Anything, connect with Dave, Bikash, you don't have the details, just send it to me. I'll connect you with them. If you have any further questions regarding the session, that too. Outside this, we look forward to seeing you in the next session. We have quite a few sessions planned. Our next session would be with Chris Ray, who's a security geek. So we have a lot of exciting sessions coming over, and I'd love to see all of you again with more people joining in. Thank you so much, Dave, Bikash, Nasheen. Look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Audience, if you're a CISO or a security head or a security peer in general, please feel free to join us at the community at CISOplatform.com. Free memberships, end user organizations. We collaborate together and contribute back to the community. And once again, use my email ID to reach out. I will turn off my webcam, but if you have any questions, I'll be back on. Steve, Vanna, this session is over. Thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to meeting in the next one. Bye-bye.